So today I'm going to be talking about lead in water. So you probably have all heard about the issues in Flint. We're going to talk about what happened in Flint and what's going on in Chicago, in case you're worried about this in your water supply. So the main issue, there we go. The main issue is that the EPA estimates that about 10 million homes could be impacted and contain lead pipes, and we'll talk about years that you've had your pipes in your house. How if the potential for you having them in there, and so this could impact you. Homes built before 1986 might have them. So if your home was built after that, you won't have any lead lines, and that there's no safe level of lead for children and even for adults. There is really no safe level. There's not, like we talk about pollution in water, sometimes a little bit is good. I mean, like copper. You need a little bit of copper. There's certain types of enzymes that need it, but you don't need a lot. You need very, very, very little, but there is no safe levels of lead inside of water. So what is the main issue when it comes to lead inside the water, especially when it came to Flint? Well, one of the main issues here is the mains. Okay, so what happens with the city is that the water that's being pumped out of the ground, when we talked about well water and we talked about groundwater pollution and we talk about things getting into it, nitrates, whatever, this is not that problem. What the problem here is the actual physical infrastructure. This is an infrastructure problem, not a geology problem. So this is one of the few times I don't get to say geology is the most important thing. So what this problem really is here is that you'll have your main that goes underneath the street right about halfway through your sidewalk, somewhere in your sidewalk mine's right there. There's a meter that connects you to it, and then you have your supply line. You own everything from that meter over to your house and everything within inside your house. The city itself owns all of this. So what the main problem here is that the issue here is that where the customer's responsibility is, this is your home. So if your home was built after, before 1986, this could be in your home be a problem with your house, not and so it's not the city's responsibility. It is your home's responsibility. And so we'll talk about how this works. Maybe we can think about some ideas of how you would fix this if you were going to be dealing with it. But this is a supply problem for inside your home. So these water quality issues are home by home basis, and you physically own them. So when we talk about lead and copper, the rule for contamination and stuff like that is, there's a maximum contaminant level that's set in parts per million. For lead and copper, if you notice there's a little asterisk next to it. Well, lead, the legal limit here is 15 parts per billion or 0.15 parts per million. Okay, so if we go with 14 parts per million, and I already said there's no safe level, but we have to put a level in there. We can't just say 0 because you can never prove a 0. You can only prove what you have inside of there. And copper is at 1.3. Well, lead and copper, again, are both problems with infrastructure. They're problems with your pipes in your house, like if you have lead pipes, if you have copper pipes inside of your house. So it's not a water coming into the supply system, it's a infrastructure. So what they did was in 1991 they set up what's called the lead copper rule. So they go through and they know which homes inside of a town actually have lead pipes inside of there, and copper pipes, and they know based upon the age of your home and who built it and everything else, they know if your home potentially has lead pipes. So based upon the population of your city, every so many months you're supposed to send out a supply things to the homes, and you fill it up yourself and you test the water with inside your house, and we'll get into the testing here in a second. We'll talk about how that testing works. So what they do is if no more than 10% of the homes are above these, then you're fine. So you have so many homes in a city that, like the size of DeKalb, they know how many how many homes they have to test every year, every time they go through testing. And then if not more than 10% of them exceed these limits here, then they're okay, because there may be a few homes that exceed it, and that could be because of home issues, how they sampled, a whole bunch of different reasons. So it's very different than a lot of other types of MCLs. So what happened in Flint? So the Flint water crisis was like a perfect storm of everything that could possibly go wrong. So what happened with Flint was, first of all, Flint was under they were losing money. They were put under an emergency financial situation by the state. They were going bankrupt. They had people who weren't even from Flint. It was just a horrible mess. So the financial people came into the city and said, well, how can we save money? And they looked around and they go, hey, why are we getting water from Detroit? It's a ways away. We're paying money to Detroit. We've got our own river right here. We have our own treatment plants. Why are we getting all this money for this water from Detroit and shipping it up here? If we get our own water, we could save ourselves a lot of money. So that was the impetus for this. So they decided to switch over to the Detroit water. Well, there was a couple issues that they did not take into account when they did this. First of all, there was the corrosivity of the water. So the lead and copper problem inside of pipes is that the water is corrosive. Just think about salt in the wintertime, how it eats away at the metal of your car. If water is corrosive, it will eat away at your pipes in your house. And if you've got lead pipes or lead solder or copper pipes, you're releasing that into your water. If your water is not corrosive, you won't get that into your pipes. So how do water get more corrosive? Well, one of them is road salt. That's one of the things that can happen to it. There's a lot of other ions that are inside of water that can add to it. So the Flint River water was extremely corrosive to start off with compared to Detroit River water. So this water, GM, who's got a manufacturing plant that would never use that water because it was so corrosive to their pipes and everything else that even with treatment they could not get it non-corrosive enough in order to be able to use it in their manufacturing facility. So that's how bad the water was. So Detroit's corrosivity, and this is just a ratio of chloride to sulfate, was 0.14, while Flint was 1.6. So very corrosive water. One of the other things that contributed to even making the Flint water even more corrosive than the Detroit water that added to it was that if you add chlorine to organic material, and so we add chlorine to all of our drinking water supplies. So here's my bottle of tap water here. We add chlorine because sometimes you're going to smell that there's chlorine inside of the water. That chlorine that's in the water is there to kill off bacteria, and you have to maintain so much free chlorine within inside of your system in order to kill off any bacteria that are inside your home so we don't get disease. This is one of the best public health things that we've ever done. This is why we've got so much better health in our country, childhood mortality. Places like Cambodia, when they instilled putting in chlorine into their drinking water, childhood morbidity dropped tremendously. It's a great public health. So we add chlorine. Well, the Flint River water has a lot of organic material in it. So when you mix organic material and chlorine, you get what are called trihalomethanes. This is the compound right here. Well, trihalomethanes are a known carcinogen, so you can't have them in your waterways. So we have this trihalomethane being created. And so how do we stop from trihalomethane being created inside the water? Well, what they would add is what's called ferric chloride, FeCl3. Okay, so it's a salt inside of there, and they would add the salt, and what it would do is flocculate the organic material so that it wouldn't interact with the chlorine. Okay, so a flocculate, what does that mean? So it would take the organic materials that are all floating around, and then they would stick them together. It would clump them together, and then because they're a bigger clump, they would fall out of solution. So what they were doing is they were adding ferric chloride to the water to help get rid of the organic material, thus increasing the corrosivity of the water. So it was already highly corrosive, and then they were making it even more corrosive by adding ferric chloride into the water. The other thing that happened with inside of Flint, again, this is just a perfect storm of everything going wrong because they weren't used to this very highly corrosive water. They were used to this nice low corrosive water from Detroit. So the city was not adding in protections to keep the corrosive water from eating away at your pipes because they were like, well, we don't have to. So the other thing that they did was what you would do inside of a town is you would add orthophosphates. So here's orthophosphate. You add it to your water, and then what it does is it produces this little white film, and I'll show pictures of it here in a second. This white film that forms on your thing, and so when you have this highly corrosive water into it, it can't eat away at the pipes. And without the orthophosphate, it just eats away at the pipes and any of the pieces in between it, and just releases lead into the water. So they weren't putting in this orthophosphate. They were just adding in very highly corrosive water without any protection, without doing the work. And then they were doing this. So one of the reasons they just weren't ready for it, they just, we do what we always do. We just put in this stuff and this is what we do. And because they were so cash strapped and they did not have good people, they had that issue. The other thing that happened in Flint, and the person went to jail for this, is remember the lead copper rule? And they have to test the homes. Well, it came to be found out that the person who was in charge of that, the numbers were greater than 10%, very much greater, but he was falsifying the data to drop it down less than 10 so that it wouldn't kick it into pollution. And so he was falsifying the data. How this was found out about was there was a doctor in the town. She noticed high lead levels in children's water and children's blood, and then they figured out it was the water situation. So Flint was a perfect storm of issues. The other thing that came from it was that it really opened the entire country's eyes to the idea that there could be lead inside of our water. We removed lead from our gasoline because we did not want people breathing that in. And I'll put an article about decreasing crime and lead onto the Blackboard site. So we did that. We got rid of lead paint so that, and I've always wondered this. I was talking to somebody about this, and I'm like, why would children eat paint or lead paint? And I come to find out that lead paint actually tastes kind of sweet, and so kids would eat it. Yeah, I know, really. So there was these issues. So we got rid of those two, but we did not we changed our pipes, and we outlaw now lead, even solders, lead pipes inside of homes. But a lot of homes still have the major original infrastructure. And it's very expensive to remove your pipes. So it comes out to be one of the last sources of really major lead pollution in the city.